Welcome to the Menopause and Cancer podcast, where we speak with cancer patient survivors and incredible experts in their fields to help us find solutions to our symptoms and ideas to improve our health. My name is Danny Binnington, and today we're tackling something so many of us struggle with: sleep, or should I say specifically, the lack of sleep. Now, this is the end of our Menopause and Cancer What's in My Toolkit festival. We've had an incredible few weeks, and it's been really good to look at what is in your toolkit, what are all of our options. So please go back to the last few weeks to have a look and get all of our doctor's advice on different symptoms like joint ache or hot flushes or low libido, but also all the way back to, I think it was week 2 when we talked about the important benefit of exercise, and we had Professor Anna Campo on the show. These are really empowering episodes, giving us the agency to really take part in our recovery and healing. All of these episodes have been sponsored to us by Astellas Pharma Limited, and it's been brilliant to get all of the conversations out to you. Earlier on, or last year, we had all of our members from our community join us to live sessions. And through the support of Astellas, we were able to get all of these conversations out to you so that our wider audience that can't make our live recordings and our live workshops also get the benefit of our expert advice. But for today, if you've ever found yourself lying awake in the middle of the night, you're staring at the ceiling, you're feeling like everything is 10 times worse, because it does feel like everything is 10 times worse in the middle of the night, you're not alone. Insomnia is incredibly common for cancer survivors, with many, many struggling even years after their initial diagnosis. I've been very lucky to have known Dr. Zoe Schaedel, a menopause expert, a sleep expert with extensive experience helping cancer survivors. And she has educated me and our community over the years. But today's conversation is a bit different, because we're talking about exactly how and what your plan to better sleep must entail. We are going to bust some myths: magnesium, melatonin, sleeping pills. We're going to talk about all of it. But most importantly today, we're going to talk about how you can plan for better sleep. And this plan does not start in the evening. It's not about sleep hygiene. This plan starts first thing in the morning when you wake up. So let's dive in. Dr. Zoe Schaedel is an incredible powerhouse. I'm so lucky she's here again with us today. And you'll also be hearing from lots of the women in our community. Right, let's plan to sleep better. From a previous conversation going years back, and I hope you won't mind me sharing this today, Zoe, you said when you were a GP yourself, you didn't think you could do a good enough job for your patients when it came to sleep. And I don't want to undermine any GP out there. We know they have their limitations of time, resources, what they've learned, what they can do. But what were those limitations, and why didn't you think you did your patients justice?
There has been very few in the way of treatment options, but there has also been very little in the way of training. So it is, we talk about how in menopause, GPs don't get enough training, but in sleep medicine, there is no training at all. As part of my medical school, as part of my GP training, I never was taught about sleep. And I could really feel myself coming up against this with my patients when I was working mostly as a GP. And patients would come and they would say they were not sleeping. And what do we do? Do we give sleeping pills? And we know there's lots of downsides to the sleeping pills. And then this idea of sleep hygiene came along. And I bet lots of you kind of know a bit about sleep hygiene. And so I would give that instead. And I would say, well, no, you don't need a sleeping pill. You should cut out caffeine, or you should, get out in the light first thing in the morning. And I thought I was being a brilliant doctor because I didn't want to rely on those pills, that I knew weren't great. But then what happened was people would come back and say, but that's not working. I've cut out my caffeine. I'm behaving perfectly. I'm doing all the exercises. I'm doing everything. And I just felt completely at a loss. Like, how can I be a good doctor here? There must be something more. And then I did lots and lots of sleep training, which was really eye-opening. And I realized that there are lots of other things out there. There's not always one answer, and it's not always an easy, quick fix either, but there is so much more. And I think it's really, to me, now the options and the toolkits and thinking about sleep in a completely different way. It really helps me help my patients, I hope.
Thank you so much for that. And I want to ask people at home now, and I'm going to launch the poll. I think I've launched it. Do you think a good sleep hygiene treats insomnia? And we're going to talk about what a good sleep hygiene is. But those are all the things like don't have 4 cups of coffee, Danny. It might mess up your sleep. Turn off your technology. Don't have blue lights. Lavender spray, magnesium, cool room. I mean, Zoe will tell us more about what that is because I know it's important. Do you think it is a good treatment for insomnia? And let's start there. Let's start with all of the treatments that Zoe prescribed to her patients as a GP that she wasn't quite happy with, but we're going to work our way through, aren't we, Zoe? I'm going to, anyone else for the poll? Loads of you. Oh, there we go. End the poll. And I'm going to share the results with you. So 38% say yes, a good sleep hygiene can treat insomnia, and 62% said no, they don't think it helps. Zoe, over to you.
So I think this is really important because sleep hygiene is important, and there are tweaks we can make in our lifestyle that can improve our sleep. And it's really good to know about these. But on its own, it doesn't necessarily treat our sleep problem. And it really depends on where we are with our sleep, where we are in this kind of journey. And if you are someone that's had a sleep problem for a long time, like insomnia, where you might struggle to fall asleep or you might wake up a lot at night, if you then have perfect sleep hygiene, it still may not get better because it can form a bit of a habit. I know people can kind of feel like their sleep just won't ever go back, and it feels as though they're stuck with this awful sleep. And in that situation, cutting out caffeine or, keeping a cool bedroom, all the things we can talk about, it's just not enough. So it's not that I suggest lots of coffee before bed or that, we start downing shots at night, but it's just that it's not enough. And you might need a little bit of extra help to undo that habit that has been formed. That's the way the sleep problems work. Something often triggers a sleep problem. So it could be menopause. It could be a cancer diagnosis. It could be medication, treatment. All sorts of things can trigger a sleep problem. But even if you take away that trigger, so, you get through the other side of your treatment or you stop taking the medication, then the sleep problem can become a habit. And often, not always, but often, that's what I'm seeing when I'm speaking to people. Their brain and their body have got into the habit of not sleeping. And we have to try other techniques as well as having good sleep hygiene to try and help.
What I'd like to understand from you today, Zoe, is everything out there. You often talk about a buffet of options, and different options are helpful at different times, and we're all different, right? Some of us, maybe we need a sleeping pill. You often say that whatever helps for a period of time, and some people will say no more medication. But we also know a sleep problem isn't just one sleep problem. It's not one thing. So it's just like with GSM symptoms, right? We know it's not just vaginal estrogen, right, ladies, or vaginal dryness that we struggle with. There's so many layers to it. Would you be able to use the message box at home, the chat box here, and tell me how you are experiencing this, like the sleep issue? Is it you wake up once a week in the middle of the night and you can't go back? Or is it, I don't know, that you have a hot flush and that wakes you up? Or is it that your anxiety is really bad and your mind is really loud? I know in the times of where I have heightened anxiety, I'm almost quite scared to go to bed. I don't know if that makes any sense, but like I feel like I want to go and sleep in my children's beds, or I don't, all sorts of things. And then they go, "Why are you here, Mum? Just get out of my room, get out of my bed." And I just feel like going in my own bed is a scary place. So the chat goes to me, everyone. So feel free to use the chat and just tell me, are you waking up in the middle of the night? You can't go back to sleep? Is it first thing in the evening that you can't doze off and it takes you hours?
I think sometimes as well, it's about what our expectations are around sleep. And I think it's also okay to say that it's okay sometimes to have periods of life where we don't sleep perfectly. And it's really natural and it's really understandable. And that can sometimes worry people because I think there's a lot out there saying about how important sleep is to our health, to our longevity, to our recovery, to all sorts of things. And actually, it's really important to know that as humans, we can weather a little bit of sleep deprivation. Look at anyone that's had a baby, it doesn't kill you to have some months where you are not sleeping well. Although it might not be easy, it might be okay. And I think sometimes to take the pressure off and allow, look, this might just be a bit of a short time where sleep is disrupted for lots of reasons and it can get back on track. So it really depends where you are. But I think sometimes also just take the pressure off. If you feel okay, it's okay to have a little bit of disrupted sleep for some time.
It's really hard, isn't it? Because you hear things like it won't matter what you eat and how much you exercise. If you're not sleeping well, there is no benefit. And you're like, oh my God, that's so shocking. I've put all this effort into eating well and exercising. And then they say, just because you're not sleeping, all of your good things are undone. Or this week, we had an email into the organization and someone said, gosh, there is all this narrative out there that early menopause is awful for your bones, brains, and heart, and only HRT will help. But that's not true either, isn't it? And so it's looking at the bigger picture and thinking, what is it that I can do right now with my ability and the knowledge I have and the energy I have, isn't it? But it can
Totally.
get
I
quite
really don't like
exhausting,
that
you know?
messaging because
Oh,
that messaging is designed. So, like the whole, if you don't sleep well, you're basically going to die. That's designed for people who don't take sleep seriously, right? So, there are a whole load of
yeah.
people out there who are like, I'll sleep when I'm dead. It doesn't matter to me, and blah, blah, blah. And there's been a really big campaign. And I think it's important to try and say, no, you've got to take sleep seriously. It does help. But that messaging that you've talked about how important it is for everything, it's not for us. It's not for people that know sleep's important, that are struggling with sleep. It really doesn't help. And as much as possible, we need to just shut that out. I know it's
Thank you.
hard and I know there is that out there, but that's not true medically. Like Danny says, there's this messaging about HRT being the only thing. This really isn't true. This really isn't true. There's so much to life. And I mean, I suppose if we believed all of this, we would have to live a perfect lifestyle. We would have to home cook and forage every single meal. We would have to not ever drink alcohol. We would have to be in a relaxed state because we know stress is bad for us. No one can live like this. And sleep is the same. There is give and take, and there is the possibility that you can have some bad time and you can still be fine. I still want to help. I'm not saying just live with it, guys, but I'm just
No.
saying that it's sometimes okay.
Shall we look at what people are experiencing?
Yeah,
Anxiety affects getting to sleep or back to sleep
yeah,
after waking during the night due to vivid dreams or needing a
yeah,
wee. So there is that bladder getting in the
yeah.
way as well. Someone wakes up multiple times every night, either due to pain, toilet, or hot flushes. But my mind doesn't run overtime anymore like it. Regular waking up. Sometimes I wake up and I stay awake. Wake up very often between 3 and 4 a.m. It's the witching hour, frustrating. Someone wakes up 4 times a night. You move to the cool side of the bed, and you currently don't share your bed, but you do go back to sleep quite quickly. So that's good, but it's still interrupted. My husband wears one of those funny watches that tells you how to live your life. It's stupid. I tell him I think it's stupid because he tells me, oh, my watch is telling me not to exercise today. And I said, well, are you trusting your watch more than your gut instinct? What a numpty you are. Anyway, but I know people that say to me, oh, well, I feel like I got 8 hours sleep, but my watch is telling me I didn't get a good enough sleep. And then people think they didn't. So, it's crazy, isn't it? Anyway, waking up with hot flushes throughout the night. Busy brain too. Insomnia is largely due to medication, I think. Someone
Mm.
is saying, I cannot fall asleep easily, and then I wake up between 2 and 3 a.m. I'm very tired as it has been a prolonged period of time. I take 10 milligrams of melatonin, but I crave for more now. Waking in the early hours from 4 a.m. with a night sweat. Regularly struggle to get back to sleep because of the mind monkeys. I wonder what those are. I drop off to sleep easily about half the time, but wake up many times, hot sweats, then cold. About half the night a week, I wake up and I can be awake for an hour and a half to 2 hours. difficulty trying to sleep with a very loud mind.
Yeah.
Some say, but means I don't ever get a deep sleep. Is
Yeah.
tamoxifen the problem here? And so many more messages, lots more messages. And I'll get you to undo the
Yeah.
microphones in a moment. How do we
Okay.
untangle lots of different scenarios?
Yeah. So I kind of want to dive in to talk about some of these things, and perhaps then you can kind of bring me back to the other things because I think we're going to have to do it in chunks in a way. So I want to start, I suppose, something that people mentioned a lot. So I think waking up in the middle of the night was the biggest one, and I'm going to come back to that in a moment. But firstly, the idea that there are these flushes and there are these temperature symptoms, I just think it's worth focusing on a little bit on those. So, there are lots of reasons why people might have those kind of hot flushes, temperature changes, cold sweats, all sorts of changes in your temperature. And they will really often really disrupt sleep because when you go to sleep, your own core body temperature has to drop. That's part of going to sleep. And then it stays lower all throughout the night until it starts to rise towards your waking time. So you can see if you're having a kind of hot flush or a sweat, it's going to bring you out of sleep, and that will happen really often. And there might be all sorts of reasons why you are experiencing those flushes, like a natural menopause, like a surgical menopause, like aromatase inhibitors or tamoxifen. All of these things can cause those temperature symptoms. So the first thing I would say is, look, if this is disrupting your sleep, it is worth having a discussion around treatment if it's something that you would feel comfortable doing. So there are medications that can help, and there are other things that can help. So acupuncture is a non-prescribable option that's certainly offered locally by Macmillan in our area in their cancer centre. So acupuncture can really help to reduce the hot flushes, and sometimes it can help with sleep as well. Then there's the kind of prescribable options. And I know that Danny's done different workshops on these, and you've probably all heard of these, but things like the serotonin medication, we talk about venlafaxine or escitalopram, and these can be taken alongside endocrine therapies and safely. So these can really help to reduce those hot flushes, and consequently, that can then help to improve your sleep. I've seen it a lot. So they are definitely something to think about. Or oxybutynin, or the newer Veoza that we have, only privately, but that's coming. So first thing is, if you are experiencing temperature symptoms and you know that it's disrupting your sleep, is there a solution to that? Could you try something for that? Because that might just take the pressure off your sleep, and you might find that it improves then. So that's the first thing. And certainly, I hope that you've all got a doctor that you can speak to about that sort of treatment. The second thing is about waking up. And when we're talking about waking up in the night, which is so hard, there's things that we need to think about in terms of things you can do in the daytime and things you can do in the nighttime. And then we need to focus on your mind bit as well. Okay. So in the daytime, often when sleep problems have been going on for a while, particularly if you had some kind of cancer treatment or medical intervention, there's a little bit of sort of blurring the boundaries of our body clock and our circadian rhythm. So sometimes people have been resting more than they would have done. They're not quite so active. Often people have spent more time, sitting down, being in bed, or all sorts of things. And your body doesn't get the same kind of cues and triggers as it would perhaps before all of this. And so there's something about when we're not sleeping well at night, it's to make sure that our day and night signaling is really strong. So we have to try harder than we would have. Before, we didn't need to think about it. Day was day, night was night. But we start to have to try harder. And there's things to do with timing, temperature, light when you eat that can just start to get the rhythm back in. So, firstly, in the mornings when you get up, not if you're getting up at 4 a.m., but say after 7, it's important to think about getting a bit of light. So, this is saying to your body, it's the end of nighttime. A bit of light will say, I'm going to shut down that melatonin production from the night. So melatonin is something that's being produced overnight, part of the kind of circadian rhythm, allowing you to sleep. So we want to shut that off in the morning, because then If you shut it off then, it's triggered to be produced 12 hours later. So you want to start giving it some signals. So morning, we don't want melatonin. Also, if you are having difficult nights where you're waking up a lot, are you doing that thing where you're falling asleep at like 6 in the morning after not having much, and then you're sleeping in a bit? You're perhaps grabbing those couple of hours, 7, 8, 9, and then you're getting up. I know it might be that you need to do that. It might be that you need to do it. But if you can think about setting a really regular waking time and you actually get out of bed at like 7 or 8, you don't hang around in bed even though you're tired, this can really give our body the right signals. So get up, get some light. And you can do that by going outside if you can. But actually, if you're not in that sort of situation, that's not easy. Sometimes even a light box. I don't know if any of you have had a light box before, but you can buy them on Amazon, 10,000 lux. You just have it near you. You can do it while you're getting on with, getting ready, doing your breakfast. And it's just giving you that signal. Obviously, the perfect thing to do is be out there having a beautiful walk in the lovely countryside and beautiful sunlight. But let's just think practically. If you can't, a light box can be really good signaling. This is the end of night. This is when you have your light. Half an hour is about perfect for a light box. So just think of that. And then we need to think about what's happening in the daytime. And we want to give our body signals, even though we're exhausted, that this is the active time and that we try and do things that build up something called our sleep drive during the day. So our sleep drive is a sort of level of sleepiness. In the morning, it should be low if we manage to get some sleep. And it starts to build up naturally as the day goes on, but we can boost it. If you've had a sleep problem for a while, your sleep drive is lower. So you have to think about how to boost this up a bit. How do we boost it? And movement and sort of stimulating activities do help with this. And again, this isn't you need to be going and doing aerobics 3 times a day. It's what can you manage? Can you just do 10 minutes more of a walk or get outside or do something to move your body to give your body that signal that it starts to build up this sleep drive. So it's small things can make a big difference. So any more, and if you are in a situation you can do a bit more exercise, the evidence for that is quite strong that actually you can really boost your sleep drive if you exercise. So that's one thing to think about. So we've got a bit more activity, we've got a bit more light in the morning, and also just think about when you're eating. So try to keep your meal times as regular as possible. We're trying to give signals to our body clock, and particularly your dinner, the last thing you eat. We want to give the body signals that the day is done. So at dinner time, whenever that works for you, that should really be the last thing you eat. So if you can, don't be grazing afterwards because your body still thinks it's being kept active. So your pancreas releases it's the hormones, and that can actually shut down melatonin when you're processing food. So we want to just take away all these distractions and say to the body, well, dinner's over. I'm about to be ready to get into nighttime and give the body those signals. So if you can do that, that's good. Then we need to think about what happens when you wake up, but also a bit about your minds and your thinking. So I think it's so important because so many of you have said that your brains are just not doing what you want. It's like harmful for you, being awake, having all these thoughts that are really negative and really not nice. And I think it's just important to say, in my opinion, but also through what we know about science, nighttime is just so bad for thinking. The quality of our thoughts is different, and it's not your fault. It's not just because you're not doing a good job of thinking right. It's that our brain works differently. So these different bits of the brain activate differently. And the really kind of anxious part of the brain, called the amygdala, that really perks up at night. Whereas the logical bit of the brain that kind of keeps it in check, and that works in the daytime, but it doesn't work at nighttime. So if you allow yourself to think, and I know it's not our choice, but if you allow yourself to be thinking at night, the chances are it's going to be more anxious, more worried, more negative, and you won't have that kind of logical control to keep things in track. And also, it's dark, it's cold, you're on your own, everyone else is asleep. It makes you feel lonely and awful. And there's nothing to distract you from this thinking. So what do? You can't just go, right, I'm not going to think. I'm not going to think. You try to give yourself other things to do. So for me, a huge part of managing being awake at night is having a plan and giving yourself something else to do. Okay. Now, everybody is going to find something different that suits them, and you've got to find the right thing for you. But you need to think about it in the daytime. Any decision making when you wake up at 2 in the morning isn't going to be particularly good because it feels awful. So think about it in the day. And you need to decide. So there's different exercises that you can do. So some people like them. I'm going to give you a couple of examples. So things like breathing exercises. Now, breathing exercises aren't for everybody, but they are very powerful. So when you breathe and you breathe in a certain way, it sends messages to your brain to activate the parasympathetic nervous system, and it gives the sense of safety. So you want to tell your body, I'm safe, I'm okay. And so there's different breathing exercises like box breathing, where you breathe in for 4. So you breathe in, count to 4, and then you breathe out for 4 and you hold it, count to 4, breathe in for 4, and so on. There's YouTube videos on this. So it slows it down a little bit. It gives your brain something to do because you're counting. And it just gives those messages that you're safe. And you can just do that for a few minutes when you wake up. There's another type of breathing called 4-7-8. So you breathe in for 4, you hold it for 7, you breathe out for 8. And again, they are easy. They're easy to do. And if you are someone that feels comfortable doing that, it can just be a good initial thing of like, right, I'm here, just going to breathe. I'm just going to tell my brain I'm safe. Okay. I'm not saying it's going to make you go back to sleep, but it's just going to sort of get you out of your head in that first instance and just get you a bit more into your body. And that is what we're trying to do at night. We don't want you in your head.
You know,
Go on.
thank you for sort of acknowledging that that monkey brain is much worse in the middle of the night, because to the best of my ability, it does take me to the worst place, to the worst case scenario in the middle of the night. And everything I have learned in a decade of being a cancer patient or post-cancer survivorship goes out the window at 3 o'clock in the morning. It's like I've never known anything, and I feel so stupid. And I try to breathe, and then after 2 rounds of breath, I get very bored and very distracted, and then it stops. So it's crazy
So
how that,
yeah.
To me, I have to listen. So I listen to, free YouTube things to help me breathe or to calm me down, or because even 10 rounds of a simple breath, my mind can't focus on it because it's like so all over the place. But for everyone that's mentioned the monkey mind, I think is going to feel reassured that it's a real thing in the middle of the night.
It is a real thing, and it doesn't mean your life is awful. It doesn't, it feels like life is things are so awful, but it just, it's not true always. It is just,
no.
it is the way what your brain is doing. So we've got the breathing, but that isn't going to be enough. Like Danny says, that's not going to be enough for a lot of people. Actually, some people, they don't like it. It makes their chest feel, anxious. They don't like that focus on their breath. So I think there's also other things, and we're just trying to give your brain some things to do. Just another quick idea is, and this is something I personally use a lot, so I always share it as well, which is visualization exercises. So again, not everyone can do this. About 70-80% of people can do this easily, and 20 can't. But it's an idea that you think of a very detailed picture in your mind. It might be a journey, it might be a walk through a forest, it might be a trip to the beach. For me, they tend to be shopping related, and I go to Selfridges and I think about all the lovely scented candles. And so, but whatever it is, it doesn't matter what it is. It's something you can focus on in a lot of detail. So I literally walk through, think about the way the tiles feel under my shoes. I pick up different candles and like fig and basil or whatever it is. It doesn't matter. But the whole point is that your brain is just doing something else. I personally, I've learned to find that enjoyable. I actually don't now when I wake up, I think I'm going to go to Selfridges. I'm going to smell those candles and I'm going to spend a bit of time or leather handbags. That also is perfectly fine for me. But it doesn't matter what it is. And our visual mind is much slower. It allows our body to slow down. It slows our breathing and our heart rate when we're thinking about images and not words. So that's why it can work really, really well. So that's just another idea, something to do. So these are all just ways to try and get away from that monkey brain. Also, a change of scene. So people don't always find this easy, but I would really recommend just getting out of bed. If you've been there for a while and you can tell sleep isn't going to come, lying awake is hard. It is actually better to get up. And I know that won't be easy and it might not suit all of you depending on where you are. And certainly don't drag yourself out if you feel like you really need that rest. But actually getting up, going and doing something else, going to another room, listening to something like Danny said, listening to Calm app has got brilliant sleep stories and they're just very calm, relaxing stories. So if you're someone you like to listen to things, that can be really helpful. Or on YouTube, as Danny said, there's lots of different free exercises. Something called progressive muscular relaxation has got really good evidence for sending people back to sleep, where you just are led to clench and release different muscle groups in turn. Just do it for about 10 seconds each. And you can just put YouTube progressive muscular relaxation, and that's just
Um,
another thing.
so Zoe, in the middle of the night, we need a plan. I hear
You
that
need a plan.
strongly from you, and it could be the breathing, the different breathing techniques, or it could be a visualization. At
Mm.
what point and at what stage should I start to get out of bed? Is it once I haven't been sleeping for a month, for a week, for a year, or when I've been lying in bed for an hour and then I get out, or at what point? Because as
Yeah.
part of a
So
plan, I need to be told, sorry.
okay, no, that's great. So I don't want people to be clock watching at night. So I actually would rather people didn't have their clocks visible to them because clock watching
Oh
tends to make you
gosh,
feel really anxious. So one of the techniques we use in sleep is to hide your clock faces. So again, this might,
that's
everyone's got to pick the right
horrible.
thing. I know, Danny, I'm so sorry. But having said that, the rule of thumb is we call it a 20-minute sleep switch. So it doesn't have to be exactly 20 minutes. It's you feel it's been around 20 minutes, okay? But 20 minutes and more is probably unhelpful. So up to 20 minutes, if you're gonna go back to sleep, you probably will, easily in 20 minutes. If you feel like it's been around 20 minutes and actually you don't feel like sleep is around the corner, it is the time to get up. Okay, so that's what we say when we're working in something called cognitive behavioral therapy. So this is part of one of the treatments we use called CBT for insomnia. And we give people the idea of about 20 minutes, but it doesn't have to be exact. And you mentioned about duration. How long has this been going on for? So really, it's whenever sleep is becoming a problem for you. So it could be 2 weeks of bad sleep. I would say don't hang around in bed, actually, even if it's just been a short time. But if you're lying there awake, it's much better to go and do something else because it's partly through lying there awake and being anxious that you build the habit of not sleeping. So it can actually be harmful for our sleep to spend too long like that. So there is no, I wouldn't say don't do this till it's been 3 months of bad sleep. I'd say, look, if it feels like sleep is a problem, don't spend too long in bed. Get up and do something else. And then when you're up, you then need to listen out for these signs of sleepiness. Like, do you feel sleepy? And if you don't, stay up, like think of something else to do, organize your cutlery drawer, look through old photos, listen to a podcast, watch some, not a thriller, but something boring on telly. All of those things are fine. And it can feel better to do something like that at night than just lie there waiting for sleep or trying. And then if you do feel like the sleepiness cues, you feel like your eyes are getting heavier, then go back and just see if sleep comes. We need to, in a way, you take the pressure off because one thing that you cannot do is force yourself to sleep. So whatever I say, whatever you read, you can't force yourself to sleep. So all we can do is set things up well enough that sleep will come. And so when you feel sleepy, you go back, you just see if sleep will come then.
Well, are we all going to be walking around in our very clean kitchens from now onwards? Because we've tidied every cutlery drawer, we've gone through the sock drawer, we've hung the washing. and we have a sense that we're all out there together in the night. Because it's worrying, like having to get out of bed, and you know, obviously have told me this many times before, but there is a worry that I get out of bed, that it means I've not been in bed, it means I haven't been sleeping, what happens about tomorrow? So it's a little bit anxiety inducing for me, thinking, oh gosh, if I've not been in bed, and that means I really haven't slept, I can't even pretend I'm sleeping. And then I already worry about the next day. But yeah, I don't know how people feel about that, but it's so
Yeah, I
important to
think
know that this is part of the plan, isn't it? This is part of the
it's a
plan.
strategy that can be really
Yes,
helpful.
yes.
Um, and again, sometimes you do it for a few, 3 or 4 nights, and then you actually start to see the benefits of it. So, actually, it really can help. I think also if it is difficult, then getting some support. So that's where something like a course of cognitive behavioral therapy for insomnia, where you have someone supporting you, can also be really helpful. And there are different ways of doing that. So this is just one technique. CBTI includes lots of different things, and also it's personal to you. And so there are apps that you can do it on, and one of them is free if you've had cancer through Macmillan. So it's called Sleepio, and it can take you through some of these strategies in a step-by-step way, and you feel like you've got really clear instructions. So Sleepio is something that some people will find helpful. Some people find it really hard and find it too hard, and that's when I wish we had more access to, a psychologist that could support someone, because I think that kind of support is really helpful. Um, yeah, and also, just if it is the mind, if the mind is part of the problem, and it's not easy to click out of it at night, which it might not be, is also there has also been quite a lot of trauma in people's experiences, and people have had a tough time. And I think make sure that you think about if therapy would be useful for you as an option, or the kind of supports that there are, because a lot of those thoughts and feelings do need to have an outlet sometimes. And at night time, we let it out because we're on our own, and the brain isn't doing what it should. But it can sometimes be important to have some sort of therapy. And then also sometimes medication. And this is where I suppose bringing in other options. So if you feel that you're affected by anxiety at other times, and it's anxiety that is the problem, there are medications that can help with that. So we think about that kind of antidepressant group of medications that focuses on serotonin, but they're really quite good for anxiety symptoms. So that's just something to be aware of. It isn't the first thing you want to think about, but it can be really brilliant. And I actually do use them relatively often in my patients, often alongside other things. So it's just worth knowing. And the other sorts of thing is, if actually it feels this is a sleep problem on its own, this isn't anxiety, this is what's happening, I'm now in that habit of sleep, there are sleeping medications that can help as well. And as Danny said, I always want to put everything out there. So yeah, if tweaks to what you're doing, all those sorts of things, if they will help, brilliant. And if other sorts of strategies will help, brilliant. But if not, and you are struggling, there are treatments out there that can be really effective. And we think about sleeping pills, they've got a bit of a bad rep, haven't they? We think about them being addictive, and they'll knock you out and all these sorts of things. But actually, over the last few years, we've got a completely different type of sleeping medication available. They're in a family called the Doras, like the Explorer, and they do something really different. They don't just knock you out, make you sedated. They work on a very specific sleep center in the brain, and they block it, and it just stops that sense of being wired and being very, very wakeful. And it takes that away, so it allows you to sleep. And so it isn't the same as knocking you out, and they're not addictive. And you should take them actually every night. So with the other sorts of medication, we say just take it on and off. We don't want you to get addicted to this. Save it so you can have one really good night when you need it. These tablets are something you do take every night, because they allow sleep in a much more natural way. So there are options. So those treatments, the brand is called QVivic, just so that you know, if anyone is interested. So there are all these different kind of options.
Thank you. Can we go back to being a detective a bit more? Because this is
Yeah.
where we sort of started, is before we try and understand what solution am I going to go for and what plan do I need, we spoke about if it's hot flushes that wake us, if it's trauma, if it's the visit to the toilet, if it's anxiety. Someone just said, what serotonin medications would you advise? Could you just go over that again?
Yeah. So again, it with those sort of medications, it really depends on the type of medication you also might be on. So different medications interact with others, but if you're struggling with anxiety, we quite often use selective serotonin reuptake inhibitors. So this family has things like you might have heard of sertraline or citalopram. So again, these are in the antidepressant family, but they're very good for anxiety. So in fact, they're probably slightly more effective for anxiety than they are for depression, actually. So they can be very useful. Everything has its pros and cons. So if you're thinking about that, that type of medication, you want to have a chat about, well, what are the good things it might do and what are the downsides? Are there any side effects? And everything has got ups and downs with it. But if it feels like anxiety is affecting your daytime as well as your nighttime, and it's not, so everyone has got worry. That's normal, right? Worry is normal. And after cancer, having fear is really normal and really understandable. But it's when it starts impacting on what you want to do in your day, your functioning, actually it's stopping you, it's getting in the way of actually being yourself. That's when actually we need to do something about it. And that something might be some type of therapy. They can be really helpful. And certainly we do use those, but also medication can sometimes be a real relief. It can be a huge relief alongside other things.
And I'm not sure, Esther, I'm going to read out your message, but feel free to unmute yourself and ask Zoe directly. Esther says she has been taking one of those SSRIs or maybe venlafaxine for about 2 months. I was resistant at first as I was concerned by the idea of taking an antidepressant. I feel my sleep is better quality, but I still wake up 4 times a night. So not sure if it's working or not. Good to hear how others have found it.
Yeah. So can I just quickly go in? Because I think this
Yeah,
is, again, it's a really good thing. So you try something and it's helping with some symptoms, but you're left
yeah.
with sleep problems. And this often happens is you might be able to get rid of the hot flashes and then you're left with a sleep problem. And I think for someone like Esther, what I would then go into is there anything else waking you? So are there sweats? Are there anything like that? Or does it feel now that this has become a habit? So the venlafaxine, the SSRIs, they can take away anxiety pretty well. And people often feel better and they feel better in the day, but they might not resolve the sleep problem. And then we look, either there's something else we have to fix. We have to be that detective and think about the hot flushes. Are you needing a wee at night? Do we need to bring down the fluids in the evening? Do we need to think about making sure there's no genitourinary symptoms, any dryness or irritation of the bladder? So that, but if there's not, that's when we think about this has become a habit, and we then think of something like the CBTI, something specific for sleep. So
Mm.
the venlafaxine is brilliant because it can help with the mood and the anxiety, but it's not a sleeping treatment. If that helps, then we've got to think about, okay, what can we do with the sleep? And if you're waking up 4 times, it's all about think about making sure you're boosting those things in the day. We haven't spoken about things like caffeine. I think, you probably all know about that, but just go back to make basics, make sure there's nothing in the day that's going to be really harming the sleep. Keep caffeine to the morning, even tea, even dark chocolate. Some people are so
Yeah.
sensitive that would disrupt their sleep, and alcohol, really, really focus. And another thing, if I could just say this, I think this will be relevant for people, is if you're having a very early night, this might be something to review, because I know so many people are so tired that you get into bed at like 9 o'clock, which I think is probably quite early for people. I'm sorry, Danny.
That's quite
Um,
late for me.
yeah, it's quite
Anyone
late.
goes
Yeah.
to bed at 8, absolutely shattered, having to put
Yeah.
toothpicks in their eyes.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, you see, if you go to bed at 8, even if you are an amazing sleeper who gets 7 hours, think 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 1, 2, 3, you're going to be up at 3 in the morning. And that's even if you are a perfect sleeper.
Zip
Okay.
it, Zoe, zip
Sorry,
it. I know
Danny. Sorry.
it.
I know I have told you this before, but all of us, we need to think about, look, if your bedtime is so early, you're setting yourself up for a fall in the early hours of the morning, particularly if you've had sleep problems. You're not your sleep drive that I was talking about is not going to be enough to keep you going. So if you can even push yourself half an hour later, often it just gets things a bit later, which is easier to manage, and it actually, if you can build up that sleep drive by staying awake a bit longer, it often keeps you asleep for longer. So it's just something else to think. I'm thinking about Esther, her 4 times waking. 4 times waking, Esther, is a big problem if you then don't go back to sleep. If you do, I'm just checking in. If actually you wake up and you're like, okay, I'm awake, but actually I can go back again, it might be all right. We probably all wake 4 times a night, but without knowing it, because we have these sleep cycles that we go in and out of light and deep sleep. So actually, being awake itself is not necessarily a problem. Don't worry if you go back. If you can't go back, that's when we really want to do something about that. Do you see what I mean?
Yeah, thank you, Zoe. And you know what? I've really loved what is so important from your message today is the plan, isn't it? Because it's really hard to manage this because on the days where I really, or the mornings after a bad night's sleep, for example, that tea, that coffee is what a lot of us need to sort of feel like we get through the day. When I started to work from home a few years ago, I had to have an afternoon. I had to sit down and shut my eyes, and within a second, I would fall asleep, which I know also isn't helpful then for the evening. But I felt so much better getting through the afternoon. My teenagers being at home, if I even had 20 minutes in the afternoon, it just made me feel so much better.
Totally.
Because
Yeah.
otherwise, you feel like hungover, don't you? That not sleeping
Yeah.
makes you feel like you're sort of like almost like a zombie. It's a bit hungover.
Yeah. Half,
I'm
yeah, you're
going,
half there. Yeah.
but having a plan to how
Mm,
to help you get through the day, what to do at night is
mm,
amazing. Like to me, that's
mm,
all I need is a little bit of a
mm,
plan. So Bea
mm.
is saying tamoxifen causes massive hot flushes and night sweats for me. She now
Yeah.
takes gabapentin, which we know is a non-hormonal alternative. It's not an alternative to HRT at all, but it's something you can use, isn't it? It's on the British Menopause Society. It's a medication
Mm.
that can help. When I'm falling asleep, I have a temperature flush, heat, and I wake up again. And then sometimes I feel hot and cold throughout the night. So clearly the drug she's on is also not helping her because otherwise she wouldn't
Yeah.
still have that temperature flush. So can I just say all of these prescribable options are a bit rubbish, aren't they, ladies?
They're not 100%. That's the problem.
No.
But so, and again, it's all about it's all about trial and error, right? You have to decide, is it doing anything for you? Is it doing enough to make it worth it? So there isn't anything that's 100%. Even HRT, if anyone's on HRT, it often isn't 100% either. So it's about what percentage is it giving us? Can it give us a 20% improvement or a 30% or a 40%? And then we've got to decide, are there downsides? Maybe you don't feel good, you might want to try something different. And I'm just going to check any of you that are also on tamoxifen or aromatase inhibitors that I'm sure you will, that you will mention this to your team when you see them, your oncology team, because often I know that people don't always mention these side effects. And it's so important. Your team will want to know. And sometimes there are tweaks that you can make, and there are changes to the type or the dose or whatever that can make a real difference. So do mention that as well, because that's always something that I would ask is actually if it is the tamoxifen that's causing this, is there a different way or different time of taking it, different dose, something else that we can try that would make a difference? So make sure you do ask that as well.
And this is so funny because this is exactly why I love our community so much. There is no right or wrong, and we're all so different, isn't it? So many people are now saying how some of the drugs we've just spoken about really helped them, and others said they really didn't help them. And that's the
Yeah,
beauty of it all, isn't it? That's
yeah,
why when you have a really nuanced conversation, all we can do is try some things and hoping they will work. Someone is saying, oh, Bea is saying, I had a hot flush every 45 minutes. She had 20 to 22 a day and 4 to 5 a night sweats. Gabapentin has helped to reduce down, but it's not got rid of them totally, but it is a huge improvement.
Yeah.
And someone said their doctor prescribed Nytol. Haven't taken them yet, but would be interested to hear Zoe's opinion because I think you can just buy them from the chemist. What is it?
Yeah.
Nytol.
It's an antihistamine. So it's like if any of you've had hay fever, you can pick non-drowsy or drowsy antihistamines. So antihistamines will naturally make you very drowsy and make you sort of a bit sleepy. And you have to actually add something like caffeine to them to make them a non-drowsy option. So when you're buying something over the counter, it's an antihistamine. Now listen, this isn't something I would prescribe to you if it was my choice. It's not that it's bad or dangerous, and you might find it helpful and feel free to try it. But for me, it's a very short-term treatment. It quite often leads to that kind of hangover feeling in the morning. And so it's usually not something you're going to use in the long term. Now, listen, in the short term, anything that works, you've got to do what you need. And if you try it and it helps, please, don't worry. But it's not thought to be the best type of sleep treatment. And I don't tend to go for them first line. I would rather use something like the doors that I mentioned or something like that. Do you see what I mean? So like there are different things that are more specific to sleep. So with Nytol, it's an antihistamine. It will just for some people, it will knock you out and you'll feel really drowsy. And that might sound absolutely brilliant to you right now, which is fine. But over the long term, it doesn't cure things and it might lead to you feeling a bit worse sometimes. So you've got to judge it. So although I don't use them often, I know that lots of people do. So you can buy them over the counter. And again, I suppose there's other things we haven't spoken about, some of the things you can get over the counter that, again, some people find helpful and some people don't. And it's worth knowing that there are things you can try if you want to. So lots of people, I bet lots of people on this call have tried magnesium already because I feel like the magnesium idea is out there really. And I don't find it very effective, but gosh, if it helps, it's a safe thing to do and you can try that. There are a couple of other things. So CBD oil, I don't know if that's come up for any of you guys, but different forms of CBD have been proven to help a bit with anxiety. Now, they haven't been proven to help with sleep per se, but if it is your anxiety, if it's the monkey mind and that helps soothe you a little bit, then I'm all for things that can help soothe the mind a little. So, and again, in the sorts of doses you can get, it's very safe. It's not going to do you any harm to try that. Even things like if you feel like you're somebody that likes to feel all wrapped up and enclosed. And again, this really might not suit anyone that's having flushes, but it almost that weighted blankets, they can sometimes be really useful as well, but not, I wouldn't do that if you were having hot flush as well. So there's all sorts of things that could be a little bit soothing. And you will all have done this anyway, is just trying to have your bedroom at much cooler temperature. So cooler than you think, cooler than your bed partner really wants it to be, but you need it a bit cooler to try and help.
Just one answer sentence. Someone thought that when you are on tamoxifen, you can't have SSRIs.
So you're right. This is about the interaction. So different treatments are there available for you. So venlafaxine is totally fine, and one of the SSRIs, escitalopram, is usually fine as well. But check with your doctor. So it's not all of them. You can't have fluoxetine. You can't have citalopram. You can't have sertraline. So there's different ones you can't have, but we often use venlafaxine. That's probably the one we use the most. That's an SNRI, and then we do also sometimes use escitalopram.
Someone is saying, could you clarify what you mean by changing levels of tamoxifen? But I don't think we need to go in this. I am going to send you in the follow-up notes a few conversations with an oncologist where all she talks about is tinkering with your endocrine treatment. Zoe,
I think I
don't
listened to
think
that
you mean
one. That's
anyone.
Claire McCauley. That was a really good one. That was a really good episode. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't
Yeah.
think you mean anyone should tinker themselves.
No, definitely not. No, really just ask them if there's something they can do. I just want your teams to know about your experience because sometimes there is stuff that they can do about it as well.
And why would someone's GP say absolutely no to sleeping tablets or melatonin? You GPs.
There is a real lack of education about sleep, and this was exactly my
Yeah.
experience And I'm really sorry because for me, sleep, well, for everybody, sleep needs treating. You need to be able to have good sleep. Not perfect sleep, not every night, but if it has been bad for a long time, you absolutely can access treatment. Just so that you know, there are a set of nice guidelines. Sometimes it helps to know these things when you go and see your doctor. So there are a set of nice guidelines about insomnia. So you have insomnia, you can diagnose insomnia if you've had poor sleep, like you wake up for 3 nights a week for 3 months or more. I'm just telling you this because this is what your GP might be thinking of. So if it's been 3 months and you've had 3 nights a week of bad sleep, which I'm sure lots of you have, then you have a diagnosis of chronic insomnia. There's a couple of bits, but you do. And so there are nice guidelines for chronic insomnia, and it does list the treatments. And it does usually say try CBTI before medication because that's the one that we think is most effective. That's the one that is the safest. Of course, there's no side effects with it. But it also says if it's not available or it doesn't work for you or it's unsuitable for you, you can go straight to medication. So they are there and the GPs should follow them. But I'm sorry if you get, but it's worth mentioning that, if you feel like you're not being offered options.
And also, we can't really start to question our GPs because a lot of them are very random. When you speak to as many women as I speak to, you're with all these healthy perimenopausal women who are denied HRT. I don't know why still. We have people with insomnia who are denied sleeping pills. You want to scratch your head, but it's just the way it is, isn't it? It's just a little bit random sometimes at the help maybe you will get, and we have to work our way through it. Some people are saying
Yeah.
magnesium has been really helpful for them.
Yeah.
Some people say NITO every now and then is really helpful for them.
Yeah,
It's so
totally.
interesting how we sort of muddle through. When you said earlier the idea of being knocked out, like most evenings I feel like knocked out anyway, but sometimes I'd quite like to be properly knocked out and have a bit of
Yeah.
NITO. Maybe I get that on my way home today.
Yeah. Yes, certainly. In the short
Nice.
term, it is not going to do you any harm at all. It's just, yeah.
Yeah. Um, Lots of people sort of sharing different things, and I think it really sums up what you have said is different things work for different people. Thank you for giving us a plan, Zoe. I know we've come to the end. So I am always a bit frazzled at the end of these lovely conversations. There's so much that goes through my head. I'm always pleased when real audience, like our real community, joins us for these recordings because it makes it so real, because I'm not just sharing the questions I think I should be asking our expert. When I'm sat in front of 40 or 50 people from our community and I get all of their messages into the chat box and I get to ask them to our expert, that's when I know we're getting the most out of our time with the expert. I hope you found today useful. I hope you now at least know that when you're up at 3 o'clock in the morning, it's really important to put a plan in place, and that plan starts in the morning. And take your time with it. If you haven't been sleeping, like Zoe said, for a long time, chances are you're not going to fix your sleep issues overnight or even within the next week. It does take time, and do reach out to other people for support. I'm really, really hoping that this year, as an organization, as Menopause and Cancer, we're going to put together our own cognitive behavior therapy course for insomnia. And we're going to make this accessible to everyone in our community, wherever you are in the world. It's a plan of mine. I said it out aloud, but we need help. So engage with us, fundraise for us, host a coffee morning for us, run a marathon for us. We're like every other organization that is a not-for-profit organization. We need your help and your support. So reach out to us, have a look on our website, how you can support us and fundraise for us. Maybe you also want to give us your time, become a volunteer. We are halfway through rolling out our volunteers network, and all over the world. We're also expanding into the US, but if you're in the UK and you want to help us and you want to become one of our volunteers, reach out to us. We can send you a pack with lots of information, and it's a really great opportunity for you to give back, because each one of you can, yes, make a significant difference in your life, but you can also help us pay this forward. There are hundreds and thousands of people out there who are struggling on their own, who haven't found us yet. So become a volunteer and join us on our mission to improve cancer survivorship for everyone out there. Thank you so much for listening, and I'll chat to you on the show next week.